The cottage door exploded inward with a crack that split the night. Seraphine threw herself over Torin, shielding her son's small body with her own as shards of wood scattered across the floor. Cold wind rushed through the shattered doorway, carrying with it the scent of pine and something else, something wild and predatory that made her blood freeze. "Find the boy." The voice was deep, commanding, and utterly devoid of mercy. Seraphine's pulse thundered against her ribs as shadows poured into her home. Not shadows, men. 4 of them, massive and broad-shouldered, their eyes reflecting the firelight with an unnatural gleam. "Torin, listen to me." She pressed her lips to her son's ear, her voice barely a breath. "The loose board under your bed. Hide there and do not come out, no matter what you hear." "Mama, go, now." She shoved him toward the back room just as rough hands seized her arms and dragged her to her feet. Seraphine fought, clawing and kicking, buying precious seconds for Torin to disappear. "Where is the child?" The leader stepped through the ruined doorway. He was taller than the others, his black hair streaked with silver, his face sharp and cruel as a blade. His eyes, pale amber, locked onto her with predatory focus. "I don't know what you're talking about." Seraphine spat the words even as one of the men twisted her arm behind her back, sending white-hot pain shooting through her shoulder. The silver-haired man smiled. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed suffering. "Varen doesn't ask twice." He nodded to his men. The first blow caught her across the face, snapping her head to the side. Copper flooded her mouth. The second drove into her stomach, doubling her over. She would have collapsed if the hands gripping her arms hadn't held her upright. "The boy," Varen repeated, circling her slowly. "We know what he is, even if you're too foolish to see it. Your husband's bloodline runs through his veins. That makes him valuable." "Corin was a farmer," Seraphine gasped. "He was just a farmer." Varen laughed, low and mocking. "Is that what he told you? Poor little human bride. You never knew what shared your bed, did you?" Another blow. This one to her ribs. Seraphine heard something crack and screamed before she could stop herself. In the back room, hidden beneath the floorboards, Torin pressed both hands over his mouth to muffle his sobs. Through the gap between the boards, he could see fragments of the scene. His mother on her knees, blood dripping from her lip. The men circling her like wolves around wounded prey. Something was happening inside him. A heat building in his chest, spreading through his limbs, making his bones ache in ways he'd never felt before. His fingernails burned. His vision sharpened until he could see every detail of his mother's bruised face, could smell the salt of her tears and the copper of her blood. "Last chance," Varen said pleasantly. "Tell me where you've hidden him, or I'll let my men have their fun before we tear this cottage apart board by board." Seraphine lifted her head. Through swollen eyes she stared at the monster before her, with nothing but defiance. "Go to hell." Varen's smile vanished. "Hold her down." They forced her onto the floor, and Seraphine couldn't contain her cry of pain as her cracked ribs met hard wood. She heard fabric tearing and understood with sickening clarity what was about to happen. Torin burst from hiding. He didn't make a conscious decision. One moment he was curled beneath the floor, paralyzed with terror. The next, he was in the doorway of the main room, a scream tearing from his throat that didn't sound human, because it wasn't. The sound that erupted from the 6-year-old was a howl, raw and wild and timeless. His eyes blazed gold in the firelight. His small fingers had curved into claws that shouldn't exist on any child's hand. Varen's head snapped toward him, and something like hunger ignited in those pale eyes. "There you are." Torin ran. He fled through the back window, glass cutting his arms as he tumbled into the night. Behind him, he heard Varen's shouted commands, heard his mother screaming his name, heard the thunder of pursuit. The forest swallowed him whole. Branches whipped his face. Roots grabbed at his feet, Tears blurred his vision as he ran blindly, that strange heat still pulsing through his body, guiding him toward something he couldn't name. The wolves behind him were faster. He could hear them gaining, could hear their panting breaths and the crash of undergrowth. In moments, they would have him. Then the trees parted and Torin stumbled into a clearing lit by torches. Horses. Men in dark leather armor. And at their center, a figure that radiated power like heat from a flame. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair black as a moonless night, and eyes the color of molten silver. He sat astride a massive black stallion, and when his gaze fell upon Torin, the boy felt it like a physical weight. Torin did the only thing his terrified mind could think to do. He ran forward and grabbed the edge of the man's traveling cloak with both hands, his claws tearing small holes in the fine fabric. "Please." The word came out broken, barely human. "Please. They're hurting my mom." For one eternal moment, the man simply stared at him. Those luminous, pale eyes took in the blood on Torin's arms, the gold still flickering in his irises, the claws that hadn't yet retracted. Then Varen's wolves burst into the clearing. "That boy belongs to us," Varen called out, stepping forward with easy confidence. "Pack business, hand him over, and we'll be on our way." The man on the horse didn't respond. His attention had fixed on Torin's face with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. "Your eyes," he said softly. "Who was your father, pup?" Corin," Torin stammered. "Corin of Millbrook." Recognition flickered across the man's expression, then shock, and then rage. Pure, incandescent, ungodly rage. "Corin," the man repeated, and his voice had dropped to something that was more growl than speech. "The shadow wolf who vanished 20 years ago. The heir who abandoned his blood." He dismounted in one fluid motion, and Torin watched in terrified awe as the man's form began to shimmer. Bones cracked, muscles rippled. Silver fur erupted across skin that was no longer skin. Where a man had stood, a wolf now towered. Massive, magnificent, terrible. And its eyes, still molten silver, still held that burning fury. Varen had gone pale. "Alpha King Kaelin, we meant no offense. The boy." The wolf that was Kaelin didn't let him finish. He moved like lightning wrapped in shadow. The first of Varen's men died before he could scream, throat torn out in a spray of crimson. The second managed half a step backward, before claws opened him from shoulder to hip. Varen shifted, his own wolf form large and powerful, but it was nothing compared to the monster that descended upon him. They clashed in a fury of fangs and fur, and for a moment, the outcome seemed uncertain. Then Kaelin's jaws closed around Varen's throat. He didn't kill him. Not yet. He simply held him there, pinned and helpless, until the rival Alpha went limp with submission. Only then did Kaelin release him. He shifted back to human form, naked and blood-splattered, breathing hard. "Take this coward back to his pack," he commanded his men. "Tell them, if they touch what's mine again, I'll mount every one of their heads on my walls." His men moved to obey. Kaelin turned to Torin, who had collapsed to his knees, shaking violently as the strange heat finally began to fade from his body. "Your mother," Kaelin said, his voice gentler now. "Where?" "The cottage." Torin could barely speak. "Millbrook. Please, please save her." Kaelin was already shifting again. They found Seraphine unconscious on the cottage floor, her face swollen, her ribs broken, blood pooling beneath her cheek. The men Varen had left behind fled at the sight of the Alpha King, but Kaelin paid them no attention. He knelt beside the woman, this fragile human who had somehow borne the last heir of a bloodline he'd thought extinct. Carefully, so carefully, he gathered her into his arms. She weighed nothing, felt breakable as glass, But when her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, when they met his with a flash of defiance despite her agony, he felt something in his chest tighten. "Torin," she whispered. "Safe," Kaelin replied. "Your son is safe." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her stop fighting. Her eyes closed, and she went limp against his chest. Kaelin looked down at her battered face and made a decision that would change everything. "We ride for Thornhaven," he announced, "and summon Bryla. This woman will not die." Seraphine woke to pain and the sensation of movement. Her body swayed rhythmically, cradled against something warm and solid. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then her ribs screamed in protest, and reality crashed back with merciless clarity. The attack. Varen. Torin. Her eyes flew open and she immediately regretted it. Sunlight pierced her skull like needles. She groaned, trying to move, and found herself held firmly in place. "Easy." The voice was deep, resonant, close enough that she felt it vibrate through the chest her cheek was pressed against. "You'll tear your stitches." Stitches. Someone had stitched her wounds. Seraphine forced her vision to focus and found herself staring at a jaw carved from granite, shadowed with dark stubble. Above it, a face that was severe and striking, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like liquid moonlight. She was in a man's arms, on horseback, surrounded by what appeared to be an army. "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak. "Where is my son?" "Here, Mama." Seraphine's heart nearly stopped at the sound. She twisted despite the pain and found Torin riding on a horse beside them, seated in front of a scarred warrior who kept one protective arm around the boy's waist. Torin. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, thank the gods." Torin. Her son smiled at her, and despite everything, despite the nightmare of the previous night, he looked unharmed. But there was something different about him, something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. A flicker of gold behind the familiar brown. "He's safe," the man holding her said. "No one will hurt him again." Seraphine turned back to study her unlikely savior. He was dressed in black leather armor that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the power coiled in his frame. A silver pendant hung at his throat, shaped like a wolf's head with ruby eyes. "Who are you?" she asked. "Kaelin." He said the name as if it should mean something. "Alpha King of Valdris." Alpha King. The words echoed through Seraphine's mind with growing dread. She knew about the wolf packs that ruled the northern territories, had heard whispers about the savage Alpha King who commanded the largest pack in the realm. Why? She shook her head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. Why would an Alpha King help us? Kaelin's wolf-bright stare flickered down to meet hers, and she felt the impact of that gaze like a physical blow. There was something timeless in those eyes. Something wild and patient and impossibly dangerous. "Your son carries blood I thought lost forever," he said quietly. "Blood that makes him pack. That makes him mine to protect." "Torin is human." The words came automatically, defensively. "My husband was a farmer. We're not whatever you think we are." Something that might have been pity crossed Kaelin's face. "Rest now," he said instead of answering. "We'll reach Thornhaven by nightfall. The healer will tend to your wounds, and then we'll discuss what your son truly is." Seraphine wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but exhaustion was pulling her back under. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Torin's face, watching her with concern. And his eyes, unmistakably, burned gold. She dreamed of wolves. They surrounded her in the mist, dozens of them, their eyes glowing like embers in the gray. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt an inexplicable sense of belonging, as if she'd wandered lost for years and finally found the path home. One wolf approached her, larger than the others, with fur black as midnight and luminous silver eyes. "You smell like moonlight," it said. And somehow, impossibly, she understood. Like something we've been waiting for. Seraphine reached out to touch its muzzle. She jolted awake to find herself in a bed. An actual bed with soft furs and clean linens, in a chamber of gray stone lit by a crackling fire. And she was not alone. An elderly woman sat beside the bed, her silver hair braided with small bones and feathers, her weathered hands busy grinding something in a mortar. When she saw Seraphine's eyes open, she smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "Ah, you wake." Her accent was thick, musical. "Good. I am Brilla. The Alpha King asked me to tend you." Seraphine tried to sit up and gasped as pain lanced through her torso. "Carefully, child." Brilla pressed her back down with surprising strength. 3 broken ribs, a cracked cheekbone, and more bruises than I could count. "You're lucky to be breathing." "Torin." Seraphine grabbed the healer's wrist. "My son. Where is he?" "Safe and sleeping in the chamber next door. The Alpha King himself stands guard." Brilla's eyes twinkled with something knowing. "He hasn't left the boy's side since you arrived." That should have been comforting. Instead, it sent a chill down Seraphine's spine. "Why?" she demanded. "Why does he care so much about my son?" Brilla studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "You truly don't know, do you? What your husband was, what your boy is becoming." "Corin was a farmer." Seraphine's voice cracked. "He built furniture. He sang lullabies. He was just a man." "He was never just a man." Brilla set down her mortar and leaned closer. "Corin was born Corin Shadowmere, son of the Shadow Wolf bloodline, one of the oldest and most powerful lineages among our kind. He was meant to rule beside the Alpha King, but he vanished before his 20th year. Abandoned his pack, his duty, his blood." Seraphine shook her head slowly. "That's impossible. I knew him for 8 years. I would have known if he was a wolf?" Brilla smiled sadly. "Our kind can suppress the shift if we choose to. It's painful, like holding your breath forever, but it can be done. Your Corin loved you enough to bury everything he was just to live a human life at your side." The words hit Seraphine like physical blows. Corin. Her gentle, laughing Corin with his woodworking and his terrible jokes, and his warm hands that always smelled of sawdust. A wolf, a creature of fang and fury hidden behind soft eyes and softer words. "I don't believe you," she whispered, but even as she said it, pieces were falling into place. The way Corin always knew when storms were coming. The way animals trusted him instinctively. The way he'd sometimes stare at the full moon with such longing that it made her heart ache. "Belief changes nothing." Brilla rose creakily to her feet. "Your son carries his father's blood, and that blood is waking. The shift has already begun." The gold in Torin's eyes, the claws she'd glimpsed in the firelight. "No." Seraphine struggled upright despite the pain. "He's just a child. He's my child. I won't let you turn him into some kind of monster." The door opened and Kalen filled the frame. He'd changed from his traveling armor into simpler clothes. A dark tunic that stretched across his shoulders, leather breeches, bare feet. Without the trappings of war, he looked younger but no less dangerous. "Leave us," he said to Brilla. The healer inclined her head and slipped past him. The door closed with a soft click that felt impossibly final. Kalen approached the bed slowly, the way one might approach a wounded animal. His pale gaze swept over Seraphine's battered face, and she could have sworn she saw anger flicker there. "You're in pain," he said. "I'm fine." "You're lying." He sat on the edge of the bed, and despite herself, Seraphine felt her pulse quicken. "The bruising on your face will fade in a few days. The ribs will take longer. Bryla is skilled, but some things require time." "I don't care about my ribs." Seraphine forced herself to meet his gaze. "I care about my son." Brilla said things. "About my husband, about Torin." I need you to tell me the truth. Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd expected. Your husband was my cousin, the son of my father's brother. He was supposed to be my second, my shadow, my most trusted advisor. Instead, he fell in love with a human woman and chose her over everything he'd been born to. Seraphine felt tears burning behind her eyes. He never told me. He was trying to protect you. Kaelin's jaw tightened. From our world. From the enemies his bloodline had made. From Varen's pack, who've been hunting Shadow Wolf descendants for generations. Why? Why hunt a bloodline? Because Shadow Wolves are rare, powerful. Their blood carries abilities that other wolves lack. Kaelin paused. Abilities that your son has now begun to manifest. Seraphine thought of the howl that had torn from Torin's throat, the claws, the golden eyes. He's 6 years old, she said brokenly. He's supposed to be learning letters and climbing trees and catching frogs, not turning into what I am? Kaelin's voice was quiet but edged. A monster? Seraphine met his gaze and saw something unexpected there. Hurt. Carefully banked, ruthlessly controlled, but present nonetheless. I didn't mean... You did. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. You're not wrong to fear us. We're predators. Killers when we need to be. I've done things that would give you nightmares for years. He turned to look at her over his shoulder. But I would never harm a child, especially not one of my own blood. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Seraphine felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. What happens now? She asked. Kaelin turned fully to face her. In the firelight, his eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. Now you have a choice. I can send you back to your village with enough gold to rebuild your life. You would be under my protection. No wolf would dare touch you. He paused. But Torin stays. No. The word was out before she could think. Absolutely not. He's shifting. He needs guidance, training, a pack to anchor him. Without it, he could lose himself to the wolf entirely. Then teach me how to help him. I'm his mother. I'm not leaving him. Kaelin studied her face with that piercing gaze. You would stay? Here? Among wolves? Knowing what we are? I would walk through hell itself for my son. An unreadable expression crossed his face. That anger she'd glimpsed earlier returned, but it wasn't directed at her. It was something older, deeper, aimed at himself or perhaps at fate. Then you stay, he said finally. Both of you. Under my protection, in my home, until Torin learns to control what he's becoming. Seraphine nodded, relief and terror warring in her chest. Thank you. Kaelin moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. He didn't turn around. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. The night Varen attacked you, your son found me in the forest. When he grabbed my cloak, when he begged me to save you, I felt something. A pull. A recognition. Seraphine's breath caught. What does that mean? Kaelin was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. It means your son isn't the only one who carries Shadow Wolf blood. He turned then, and his molten gaze locked onto hers with piercing intensity. You do too, Seraphine. Dormant, buried so deep even you don't know it's there. But I can smell it. I can feel it. The room seemed to spin around her. That's impossible, she breathed. I'm human. I've always been human. So you believe. Kaelin's smile was humorless. But blood doesn't lie. And yours is calling to mine in ways I haven't felt in centuries. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. Seraphine sat in the firelit silence, one hand pressed to her racing heart, trying to make sense of words that had just shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she'd never known existed, something stirred. 3 days passed in Thornhaven, and Seraphine spent most of them watching Torin run through the castle corridors with a freedom he'd never known in Millbrook. Watching the pack members who populated the fortress treat her son not with fear or suspicion, but with a kind of reverent gentleness that made her chest ache. And watching Kaelin. The Alpha King seemed to be everywhere, training with his warriors in the courtyard at dawn, holding council with his advisors in the Great Hall, and always finding reasons to check on Torin. "He's teaching me to track scents, Mama." Torin bounced on her bed one morning, his eyes bright with excitement. "I found a rabbit from half a mile away yesterday. Kaelin said I have the sharpest nose he's seen in decades." Seraphine smiled despite her unease. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. And tomorrow, he's going to teach me to shift properly." Torin's voice dropped to a whisper. "He says the first full shift is scary, but he'll be right there with me. He promised." The first full shift. Seraphine's stomach clenched at the thought of her little boy transforming into a wolf. But she forced herself to nod, to keep the fear from her face. "I know he will." That night, she couldn't sleep. She found herself wandering the castle corridors, her bare feet silent on cold stone. The moon hung full and heavy outside the windows, painting everything in silver light. Something pulled at her, a restlessness in her blood that she couldn't name. She followed it without thinking, through passages she didn't recognize, down stairs that seemed to spiral endlessly into the earth. The pull grew stronger with each step, a humming in her veins that felt almost like music. The corridor opened into a cavern. Seraphine gasped. The space was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows, its walls covered in paintings that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. Wolves running through forests, wolves howling at moons, wolves transforming into men and women with luminous eyes. And at the center of the cavern, a pool of water so still it looked like black glass. "You shouldn't be here." Seraphine spun to find Kaelin standing in the entrance, his face unreadable in the dim light. "I couldn't sleep." The explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. "Something was calling me." Kaelin's expression shifted. "Calling you?" "I don't know how else to describe it. A pull, like something down here needed me to find it." He moved closer, and Seraphine noticed he was dressed simply. Loose trousers, nothing else. The torchlight played across the planes of his chest, highlighting scars that told stories she couldn't read. "This is the moon pool," he said quietly. "Sacred to our kind. It's where wolves come to connect with their ancestors, to seek guidance from those who came before." "I'm not a wolf." "No?" Kaelin stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Then why did it call you? The pool only speaks to those who carry wolf blood." Seraphine shook her head. "Whatever you think you sense in me, you're wrong. I've lived my entire life as a human. I've never shifted, never felt any pull toward— Look at the water." The command was soft but absolute. Seraphine found herself turning toward the pool despite her resistance. At first, she saw only her own reflection, a tired woman with tangled hair and haunted eyes. Then the surface rippled. Images formed in the darkness. A woman who looked like her but wasn't, running through a forest, laughing, her hair streaming behind her like a banner. The woman shifted mid-stride, her form blurring into a wolf with fur the color of moonlight. More images followed. Generations of women with her face, her eyes, her stubborn chin. All of them wolves, all of them hidden, suppressed, their true natures buried so deep that even they forgot what they were. "Your bloodline has been hiding for centuries," Kaelin said from somewhere behind her. "Hunted by those who feared your power. Your ancestors learned to lock the wolf away so completely that it became invisible, even to themselves." Seraphine couldn't look away from the pool. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. though she didn't know when she'd started crying. "Why?" she whispered. "Why hide something so completely?" "Because your line carries a gift that others would kill to possess. The ability to anchor pack bonds, to strengthen them, to heal the connections between wolves that have been damaged or broken." "An anchor," Seraphine breathed. "The rarest gift among our kind." Kaylin's voice was closer now. "There hasn't been a true anchor born in over 200 years. Until you." Seraphine turned to face him. In the strange light of the cavern, his eyes seemed to glow. "I don't know how to be what you're describing." "You don't have to know." He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her cheek, not quite touching. "It's already part of you. It's why the bond between you and Torin is so strong that he found the strength to shift at only 6 years old. It's why I felt you the moment your son touched my cloak." Seraphine inhaled sharply. "Felt me?" Kaylin's jaw tightened, like coming home after 1,000 years of wandering. The air between them crackled with something unnamed. Seraphine felt that pull again, stronger now, urging her to close the distance, to press herself against his warmth. A howl shattered the moment. Kaylin's head snapped toward the entrance, his body going rigid with tension. "Something's wrong." He was already moving. "Stay here." "Wait." But he was gone, shifting mid-stride into his wolf form, a blur of black fur and pale fire disappearing into the darkness. Seraphine stood alone in the sacred cavern, her heart pounding, her blood singing with awakened power. And somewhere deep in the castle, cutting through the distant howl, she heard Torin scream. Seraphine didn't remember leaving the cavern. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her ribs screaming in protest, her bare feet slapping against stone. The scream had come from Torin's chamber. She was certain of it. "Please." She prayed to God she'd never believed in. "Please, let him be safe." She burst through his door to find chaos. Torin was on the floor, his small body convulsing, his skin rippling with something beneath the surface. Kaylin knelt beside him in human form, his hands pressed to the boy's shoulders, his voice low and urgent. "Focus on my voice, pup. Don't fight it. Let it come." "Mama." Torin's voice was a broken whimper. "Mama, it hurts." Seraphine dropped to her knees beside him, gathering his shaking form into her arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. The shift is coming whether he's ready or not." Kaylin's steady gaze met hers. "The full moon is forcing it. He needs to let go. He's terrified." "I know." Kaylin's voice softened. "But fighting it will only make the pain worse. He has to surrender to what he is." Seraphine looked down at her son's agonized face. His eyes were flickering between brown and gold, his fingernails lengthening into claws and retracting in waves. "Torin." She cupped his face in her hands. "Listen to me. Do you remember when you were learning to swim? How scared you were to put your face in the water?" A tiny nod through the convulsions. "And do you remember what I told you? That sometimes the scariest things become easy once we stop fighting them?" Another nod. His breathing was ragged, labored. "This is like that, sweetheart. You have to stop fighting. Let it wash over you like water. I'll be right here. I won't let go." Torin's golden eyes locked onto hers. She saw the moment he made the decision. His body arched, a sound tearing from his throat that was neither human nor wolf, but something in between. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur erupted across skin. And then, where her son had been, a small wolf pup lay trembling in her arms. His fur was silver white, almost luminescent in the moonlight streaming through the window. His eyes, when they opened, were pure molten gold. "Torin?" Seraphine's voice shook. The pup whimpered, pressing its nose against her palm. She felt the wetness of his tongue, the warmth of his breath, and something inside her shattered and reformed. This was her son. Different form, same soul. "You did it, baby. Tears streamed down her face as she stroked his soft fur. You did it. I'm so proud of you. Kalen sat back on his heels, watching them with an expression she couldn't read. When Torin finally shifted back to human form, exhausted but whole, the Alpha King rose silently. He'll need to rest, he said quietly. The first shift takes everything out of you. Seraphine nodded, lifting her now human son into her arms with strength she didn't know she possessed. She carried him to the bed, tucked the furs around his small body, pressed a kiss to his forehead. When she turned, Kalen was still there. Thank you, she said, for helping him through it. He's Pack. The words were simple, absolute. I will always protect what's mine. Something in the way he said mine sent heat rushing through Seraphine's veins. She thought of the cavern, of the way he'd looked at her in the torchlight, of the words he'd spoken, like coming home after 1,000 years of wandering. Kalen, there's something I need to tell you. He cut her off, his voice suddenly hard. Scouts return tonight. Varen has gathered allies. 3 packs have joined his cause and they're marching on Thornhaven. The warmth in Seraphine's chest turned to ice. When? 5 days. Perhaps less. Kalen moved to the window, staring out at the moon. I need to ride out and meet them before they reach these walls, if I can cut off their advance at the northern pass. You're leaving. The words fell from her lips before she could stop them, heavy with something that felt too much like despair. Kalen turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his face was carved from shadow and silver. I have no choice. If they reach Thornhaven, everyone here dies, including you, including Torin. Seraphine nodded, trying to force understanding past the ache in her chest. How long will you be gone? A week. Perhaps 2. He crossed the room toward her, stopping close enough that she could feel his warmth. Brilla will watch over you. Fenric will command the garrison. You'll be safe. I'm not worried about my safety. The confession escaped before she could catch it. Kalen's eyes darkened. What are you worried about then? You, she wanted to say. I'm worried about you dying in some frozen pass while I wait here, not knowing if I'll ever see you again. But the words wouldn't come. They'd known each other barely a week. Whatever this pull was between them, it was too new, too fragile to name. Just come back, she said instead. Torin needs you. Something flickered in Kalen's expression. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. Only Torin? Seraphine felt the air leave her lungs. The space between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Kalen leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. She could feel his breath against her skin, could smell pine and winter, and something wilder underneath. When I return, he murmured, we're going to finish the conversation we started in the cavern. I'm going to tell you exactly what you are to me, and then I'm going to ask you a question that will change everything. Seraphine's chest tightened with anticipation. What question? His lips brushed her cheekbone, feather light. When I return. Then he was gone, slipping from the room like smoke, leaving Seraphine standing in the moonlight with her sleeping son and a heart full of words she didn't know how to speak. 4 days passed after Kalen's departure, each one blurring into the next in a haze of waiting. Seraphine threw herself into routine. She helped Brilla in the healing chambers, learning which herbs eased pain and which accelerated mending. She watched Torin practice his shifting with the other young wolves, her heart swelling with pride at how quickly he was learning to control his new abilities. But at night, alone in her chamber, the ache returned. It started as a hollow feeling in her chest, like something vital had been carved away. Then it spread, seeping through her limbs, making her bones feel heavy and her skin feel wrong. And the dreams. Gods. The dreams. She dreamed of running through forests on 4 legs she didn't possess, dreamed of moonlight on silver fur, dreamed of Kalen beside her, his wolf form magnificent and terrifying, his eyes never leaving hers. She dreamed of his voice in her ear, whispering words she couldn't understand but felt in her marrow. Mine, my anchor, my heart. She always woke gasping, her body burning with a fever that had no source, her hand pressed to the place where her neck met her shoulder. "It's the bond," Brilla said when Seraphine finally confessed what was happening. Or rather, the lack of one. "I don't understand." Brilla sighed, setting down the mortar she'd been working with. When an alpha finds his true mate, there's a recognition, a pull. You've felt it with Kalen. Seraphine couldn't deny it. Yes, that pull is the beginning of a bond, but it's incomplete, unfinished. Brilla's eyes were kind but worried. For wolves, an incomplete bond is uncomfortable. For anchors, it's dangerous. Dangerous how? Your gift is meant to strengthen connections. When there's a bond trying to form but failing to complete, your power turns inward. It starts trying to force the connection into existence. Brilla paused. If the bond isn't completed, your own magic will eventually consume you. Seraphine felt the blood drain from her face. How long? Weeks, perhaps a month if you're strong. Brilla took her hand. But using your anchor power in combat, projecting it outward the way instinct might drive you to, that will accelerate everything. You could burn through weeks of strength in moments. When Kalen returns, you must tell him. The bond needs to be completed or... A horn blast shattered the morning quiet. Both women ran to the window. In the courtyard below, chaos reigned. Warriors were scrambling for weapons. Wolves were shifting mid-stride. And at the gates... No, Seraphine breathed. An army stretched across the valley. Hundreds of wolves in human and animal form, their ranks bristling with weapons. And at their head, mounted on a pale horse, rode Varin. They came early. Brilla's voice was hollow. The northern pass must have fallen. Seraphine's mind raced. Kalen was gone. The garrison was strong, but not strong enough to withstand this force. If the gates fell... Where's Torin? Training yard? Brilla was already moving. I'll get him. You need to hide. Hide? Seraphine caught the healer's arm. I'm not going to cower while... The first impact hit the gates like a thunderclap. Screams erupted from the courtyard. Seraphine watched in horror as wolves poured over the walls, overwhelming the defenders through sheer numbers. Fenric was fighting at the center of the melee, his wolf form massive and scarred, but even he couldn't be everywhere. Mama! Seraphine's heart stopped. Torin was in the courtyard, his small wolf form backed against a wall, 3 larger wolves circling him with hungry eyes. She didn't think, didn't plan. She simply moved. Seraphine vaulted through the window, her body moving before her mind could object. She dropped 2 stories, and something inside her, the dormant wolf, the anchor blood, rose to meet the fall. Power surged through her limbs, absorbing the impact and carrying her forward with impossible speed. She reached Torin just as the first wolf lunged. No! The word tore from her throat with supernatural force. Light exploded from her palms, silver white and blinding. The attacking wolves were thrown backward, yelping in pain and confusion. Seraphine stood over her son, breathing hard, her hands still glowing with power she didn't understand. Well. Varin's voice cut through the chaos. He approached slowly, still in human form, his pale eyes fixed on her with new interest. The dormant anchor awakens. This changes things considerably. Stay away from my son. Varin smiled. It was the same cruel expression she remembered from that night in her cottage. Oh, I don't want the boy anymore. He stopped just outside the ring of light still emanating from her hands. I want you. Do you have any idea how valuable you are? An anchor who can project her power like a weapon, you could make any pack unstoppable. I would rather die. That can be arranged. Varen's smile vanished. But first, you'll watch everyone you love suffer, starting with the pup. He gestured, and more wolves emerged from the battle, surrounding them in a tightening circle. Seraphine's power flickered. The surge that had saved Torin was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She didn't know how to sustain it, didn't know how to fight. Mama. Torin's voice was small against her leg. I'm scared. I know, baby. She kept her eyes on Varen, her mind racing for options. I know. Varen raised his hand, preparing to give the order that would end them both. A roar split the sky. Not a howl. A roar. The sound of pure, unbridled fury given voice. Varen's head snapped toward the gates just as they exploded inward. Kalen stood in the wreckage, but he was barely recognizable. His wolf form was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf Seraphine had seen. His fur seemed to absorb the light around him, his eyes blazing with silver fire, his jaws dripping with the blood of those who'd tried to stop him. And behind him, an army of his own. Wolves pouring through the shattered gates, falling upon Varen's forces with savage precision. You came back, Seraphine whispered. Kalen's burning gaze found hers across the courtyard. Even in wolf form, she could read the message in those eyes. Always. I will always come back for you. Then he launched himself at Varen, and the world dissolved into blood and fury. Seraphine pulled Torin close, shielding him from the violence, but she couldn't look away from Kalen. He fought like nothing she'd ever seen, a force of nature wrapped in shadow and silver. Varen was powerful, but he was no match for the Alpha King's rage. In minutes, it was over. Varen lay broken at Kalen's feet, still alive, but barely. The remaining enemy wolves had fled or surrendered. The courtyard fell silent except for the groans of the wounded. Kalen shifted back to human form, bloodied and breathing hard, and crossed the courtyard toward Seraphine with single-minded focus. She met him halfway. You're hurt, she said, reaching for a gash on his shoulder. It's nothing. He caught her hands, his grip urgent. Is Torin? We're okay. We're okay because of you. Kalen pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with crushing strength. She felt his face press into her hair, felt the shudder that ran through his body. I felt it, he said hoarsely. Through whatever bond we have, I felt you in danger. I've never ridden so hard in my life. Seraphine pulled back to look at his face. How? You were days away. I turned around the moment I felt the first spike of fear. I knew. I knew something was wrong. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. I will always know when you need me, Seraphine. Always. The words broke something open inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as the terror of the past hour finally caught up with her. I thought we were going to die, she admitted. I thought I'd never see you again. Never. Kalen pressed his forehead to hers. I will tear apart anyone who tries to take you from me. I will burn the world to keep you safe. Do you understand? Seraphine nodded against him, overwhelmed by the intensity of his declaration. Then pain lanced through her chest, sharp and sudden, and the world tilted sideways. Seraphine? Kalen's voice sounded far away. Seraphine. She tried to answer, but darkness was rushing up to meet her. The last thing she felt was his arms catching her as she fell. The last thing she heard was Brilla's voice, urgent and afraid. The bond, the incomplete bond, is killing her. And she used her anchor power in battle. She's burned through weeks of strength in moments. We're running out of time. Seraphine drifted in darkness. She could hear voices, distant and muffled, as if she were submerged in deep water. Brilla's urgent tones, Fenric's low rumble, and beneath them all, a voice that called to something deep in her soul. Kalen. Tell me how to save her. The words cut through the darkness, raw with anguish. The bond must be completed. Breila's voice was heavy with sorrow. But she's too weak now. The ritual requires strength she no longer has. Then give her mine. Take whatever you need from me. It doesn't work that way, Alpha. The completion requires both parties to be conscious, willing, present. She's slipping further with each passing hour. Silence. Then a sound that made Seraphine's heart crack even in unconsciousness. Kaelin was crying. She'd never heard him cry. This man who commanded armies, who tore through enemies like paper, who wore power like a second skin. He was weeping for her. Fight, she told herself. Fight your way back to him. But the darkness was so heavy, and she was so tired. There might be one way. A new voice joined them. Elder Marin, the pack's oldest living wolf, her voice crackling with age and power. But it hasn't been attempted in 500 years. I don't care if it hasn't been attempted in 5,000 years. Kaelin's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. Tell me. The moon pool. If you take her there during the blood moon's peak, the ancestors might intervene. They have the power to force an anchor's awakening, to complete the bond even when one party is unconscious. Might? Nothing is certain with the old magic. She could wake, whole and bonded, or she could be consumed entirely by the transformation. More silence. Seraphine felt herself sinking deeper, the voices growing fainter. When is the blood moon's peak? Tonight. Midnight. Then we have no choice. Strong arms lifted her from the bed. Even in her twilight state, Seraphine recognized Kaelin's scent, pine and winter and wild places. She tried to move toward it, to press closer to his warmth, but her body wouldn't respond. Hold on, he murmured against her hair. Just hold on a little longer, my heart. I'm going to fix this. I swear on my blood and my throne and everything I am, I'm going to fix this. The moon pool was different under the blood moon. Seraphine floated in and out of awareness as Kaelin carried her down the spiraling stairs. She caught glimpses of the cavern through half-lidded eyes. The paintings seemed to move now, the wolves within them running and howling. The pool itself glowed crimson, reflecting the bloody light of the moon that shone through some unseen opening in the stone above. Kaelin waded into the water, still holding her against his chest. It was warm. Impossibly warm, like bath water heated by an unseen fire. Seraphine felt it seep through her clothes, through her skin, into her very bones. Ancestors of the shadow blood. Kaelin's voice echoed off the cavern walls. I call upon you. This woman carries your gift. She is dying because I was too slow, too careful, too afraid to claim what was mine. I beg you. Give her the strength to complete what we started. The water began to churn. Seraphine felt power pressing against her from all sides, vast and utterly inhuman. It was testing her, probing her defenses, searching for something. Then it found the dormant wolf inside her. Pain exploded through her body. Not the dull ache she'd been suffering for days, but sharp, immediate, transformative agony. Every cell in her being was being torn apart and rebuilt. Seraphine screamed. Her eyes flew open, and she found herself staring up at Kaelin's face, twisted with anguish. Fight, he commanded, his voice breaking. Fight, Seraphine. Come back to me. She wanted to. Gods, she wanted to. But the pain was too much, the power too overwhelming. She could feel herself fragmenting, her consciousness scattering like leaves in a storm. Mama! Torin's voice cut through the chaos. He was at the edge of the pool, tears streaming down his face, held back by Brilla's firm grip. Mama, please. You promised you'd never leave me. You promised. The words anchored her. Seraphine thought of her son, his laugh, his curiosity, the way he'd grabbed Kaelin's cloak with such desperate courage. She thought of all the years stretching ahead, years she wanted to see, Years she refused to miss. And she thought of Kaelin, his strength, his tenderness, the way he looked at her like she was something precious and rare, the life they could build together, the love that was waiting to bloom if she could just hold on. I will not die here, she thought with sudden fury. I will not leave them. Seraphine reached deep inside herself, past the pain, past the fear, and grabbed hold of the wolf that had been sleeping her entire life. Wake up, she commanded it. Wake up and fight with me. The wolf opened its eyes. Power surged through Seraphine, silver and blazing, merging with the crimson energy of the pool. She felt her body changing, bones shifting, senses sharpening. But unlike Torin's agonizing first shift, this felt right, natural, like finally exhaling after holding her breath for 30 years. When the transformation completed, Seraphine stood in the moon pool on 4 legs. Her fur was pure white, luminescent as moonlight. Her eyes, when she caught her reflection in the glowing water, were silver. Not gold like other wolves. Silver, like Kaelin's. By the ancestors, Brela breathed from the pool's edge. A true silver wolf. I never thought I'd live to see one. Kaelin shifted beside her, his massive black wolf form pressing against her smaller white one. She felt his nose brush her neck, felt the rumble of emotion in his chest. But the bond was still incomplete. She could feel it, a thread between them that was stronger now but still not whole. One final step remained. Seraphine looked at Kaelin's wolf form, at the powerful creature who had saved her son, protected her family, nearly destroyed himself trying to keep her alive. Mine. Something whispered inside her. He is mine, and I will claim him. She lunged. Her teeth found the junction of his neck and shoulder, biting down with supernatural force. Kaelin's wolf went rigid, a sound escaping him that was half howl, half moan. Power exploded between them. Seraphine felt his mind crash into hers, felt centuries of loneliness and duty and buried longing pour through the bond. She felt his love, wild and consuming and absolutely certain. And beneath it all, she felt his wolf recognizing hers, 2 halves of a soul finally becoming whole. When she released him, they both shifted back to human form, gasping and trembling in the chest-deep water. Kaelin's hands found her face immediately, tilting it up to study her with wonder. Your eyes, he breathed. They're silver. Is that bad? It's impossible. A laugh escaped him, joyful and free. Silver eyes are the mark of an alpha. There hasn't been a female alpha born in 700 years. Seraphine processed this. I'm an alpha? You're my alpha. Kaelin pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with fierce strength. My mate. My anchor. My everything. The bond is complete. I can feel it, Seraphine. I can feel you in my soul. She could feel it too. A golden thread connecting them, unbreakable and eternal. His emotions echoed in her chest, his heartbeat synchronized with hers. I love you, she said, the words spilling out without thought. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, Kaelin. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His pale eyes were bright with tears. I have loved you since the moment your son grabbed my cloak, he said hoarsely. Since the moment I looked into his eyes and saw your courage reflected there. I have loved you through every moment since, and I will love you until the stars burn out and the moons turn to dust. Then he kissed her. It was not gentle. It was claiming and consuming and absolutely complete. Seraphine melted into him, into the bond, into the certainty that she had finally found where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, Torin was standing at the edge of the pool, his face split in the biggest grin she'd ever seen. Does this mean Kaelin is my papa now? Seraphine laughed, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Kaelin, who was staring at Torin with an expression of such naked hope that it made her heart ache. "Would you like that?" Kaelin asked the boy quietly. "Would you accept me as your father?" Torin didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the pool, splashing toward them with joyful abandon, and threw his arms around both of them. "Yes," he said fiercely. "Yes, yes, yes. I knew it the moment I grabbed your cloak. I knew you were supposed to be ours." Kaelin gathered them both close, his mate and his son, his family, his pack. And in the crimson glow of the blood moon, surrounded by the power of ancestors who smiled upon them from beyond, they held each other and let the completeness of the moment wash over them. 3 months later, Seraphine stood on the balcony of Thornhaven, watching the sun rise over the mountains. So much had changed since that night in the moon pool. Varin had been executed for his crimes against the pack, his followers scattered or absorbed into Kaelin's growing alliance. The threat that had loomed over them was finally, truly gone. But the changes within Seraphine had been even more profound. She'd learned to shift at will, her white wolf form becoming as natural as breathing. She'd learned to channel her anchor abilities with precision, strengthening pack bonds and healing rifts between wolves who'd been at odds for decades. And she'd learned, slowly and wonderfully, what it meant to be truly loved. "You're thinking too hard again." Kaelin's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. She felt his lips brush her temple and smiled. "I'm thinking about how different everything is," she admitted. "A few months ago, I was a widow in a tiny village, hiding who I was, terrified of discovery. Now I'm—" "The Alpha Queen of Valdris?" Kaelin finished, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Beloved by your pack? Mother to the most talented young wolf in 3 generations? Mate to the most insufferably confident Alpha King in history," she added dryly. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest and into hers. "Insufferable? I prefer magnificently self-assured." Seraphine turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. In the golden morning light, his face was soft, unguarded in a way he only allowed with her. "I still can't believe this is real sometimes," she whispered. "That you're real. That this life we've built is actually mine." Kaelin's expression grew serious. He cupped her face in his hands, his luminous gaze holding hers with unwavering intensity. "This is real," he said. "You are my mate, chosen by fate and claimed by choice. You are the mother of my heart, whether Torin carries my blood or not. And you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I spent centuries alone, Seraphine. Centuries of duty and war and endless responsibility without anyone to share it with. I had accepted that as my fate. And then a crying pup grabbed my cloak and begged me to save his mother, and my entire world shifted on its axis." Seraphine felt tears prick her eyes. "Kaelin, I thank the ancestors every day for that moment," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I thank them for Torin's courage and for your defiance, and for every twist of fate that brought you into my arms. You are not just my mate, Seraphine. You are my home, the home I didn't know I was searching for until I found it." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into the connection between them. Love, gratitude, the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Mama! Papa!" They broke apart, laughing, as Torin came barreling onto the balcony. At 6.5 years old, he had grown taller and stronger, his control over his wolf form now nearly perfect. But his smile was still the same, bright and joyful and utterly infectious. "The pack is gathering," he announced breathlessly. "Fenric said it's time for the ceremony." Ah, yes, the ceremony. Today, Seraphine would be formally recognized as Alpha Queen before the entire pack. It was a tradition that dated back thousands of years, a ritual that would cement her place not just as Kalen's mate, but as a leader in her own right. She was terrified. As if sensing her nerves through the bond, Kalen squeezed her hand. You've faced down enemy wolves, survived a transformation that should have killed you, and claimed an alpha king as your mate. A little ceremony is nothing. Easy for you to say. You've been doing this your whole life. And now you'll do it with me. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Together, remember? That's how we do everything now. Together. The word settled into her heart like a warm ember. Together, she agreed. The great hall of Thornhaven was packed with wolves. They filled every available space, standing along the walls, crowding the galleries, spilling out into the corridors beyond. Seraphine had never seen so many people gathered in one place, and every single one of them was looking at her. She walked down the central aisle on Kalen's arm, trying to keep her breathing steady. Torin walked behind them, his small chest puffed with pride at his role in the ceremony. At the end of the aisle stood Brilla, resplendent in ceremonial robes, holding a crown of silver and moonstones. Pack of Valdris, the old healer intoned, her voice carrying easily through the hall. We gather today to witness a claiming, not of tooth and claw, but of heart and soul. Our Alpha King has chosen his mate, and she has chosen him in return. Today we recognize that bond before ancestors and pack alike. She turned to Seraphine. Seraphine of the Silver Wolves, you came to us a stranger. A human woman fleeing violence, protecting her child with nothing but courage and love. You did not know what you were. You did not know the power that slept in your blood. But when that power awakened, you did not run from it. You embraced it. You used it to protect those you love and to strengthen the bonds of this pack. Brilla lifted the crown. Do you accept the responsibilities of an Alpha Queen? To lead with wisdom, to protect with strength, to love with your whole heart? Seraphine thought of everything that had brought her to this moment. The terror of that night in her cottage. The hope in Torin's eyes when he'd grabbed Kalen's cloak. The pain of transformation and the joy of completion. The love that had grown between them, fierce and true and utterly unshakable. I do, she said, her voice clear and strong. Brilla placed the crown on her head. It settled like it belonged there, like it had always been waiting for her. Then by the power vested in me by the ancestors of this pack, I name you Alpha Queen of Valdris. May your reign be long, your bonds be strong, and your love never falter. The hall erupted in howls, hundreds of wolves shifting and lifting their voices to the sky in celebration. The sound was overwhelming, beautiful beyond words. Kalen turned to her, his eyes shining with pride and love. My queen, he said softly, just for her. My king, she replied. He kissed her as the howls reached a crescendo, and Seraphine felt the pack bond surge through her. Every wolf in the hall, connected to her now, their strength flowing into hers and hers into theirs. When they finally broke apart, Torin was tugging at her hand. Mama, can we shift now? Everyone's shifting and I want to run with the pack. Seraphine looked at Kalen, who was already beginning to shimmer with the change. Together? She asked. He smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that was only for her. Always. They shifted as one, 3 wolves where 3 humans had stood. A massive black wolf with silver eyes, a luminous white wolf with a crown of moonlight, and a small silver pup whose golden eyes shone with pure joy. The pack parted before them as they raced through the hall and out into the morning light. They ran through the forests of Valdris, their pack behind them, their bond singing between them, their future stretching ahead like an endless horizon. Seraphine had spent her whole life hiding what she was, afraid of discovery, afraid of rejection, afraid of the power that slept in her blood. Now, running beside her mate and her son, surrounded by wolves who loved her and a kingdom that had claimed her as its own, she finally understood. She had never been hiding. She had been waiting. Waiting for a crying pup to grab an Alpha King's cloak. Waiting for a stranger to save her life. Waiting for love to unlock the door she'd kept closed her entire life. She was finally, irrevocably, exactly where she belonged. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like to listen on the go, all my stories are also available on Spotify. You'll find the link in the description below. A big thank you to everyone who's following. Your support truly means the world to me. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and let me know. Until next time.